In my 3 years as a delivery driver, I'd seen my fair share of weird and creepy scenarios. Houses that looked abandoned but had someone living inside, strange requests scribbled on order notes, and even stranger people answering the doors. But the night of August 17th took the cake, and it's a night I wish I could forget. The evening began just like any other shift, around 7 p.m., as the sun was setting and casting a dim orange glow over the city. My app pinged. An order for a large pepperoni pizza going to a relatively new housing development on the outskirts of town. The address was unfamiliar, but then again, I always enjoyed driving to new places. As I made my way there, I noticed the surroundings gradually thin out, from bustling city streets to quieter suburbs, and then eventually to barely lit roads flanked by dense woods. It was unsettling, to say the least. Upon arriving, I found myself at a cul-de-sac with only 3 houses, all of which appeared brand new. 2 of them still had for sale signs up, but the third, the one I was delivering to, had lights on. Parking in front of the house, I took a deep breath and stepped out with the pizza box. The front door opened before I even had a chance to knock. A middle-aged man, balding with thick glasses, greeted me with an awkward smile. "You're quicker than I expected," he said, eyeing the pizza. "Traffic was light," I replied, trying to keep the conversation brief. "That'll be $15. As he fumbled for his wallet, a door somewhere inside the house creaked open, and I heard a faint whimpering sound, like someone trying to call out but their voice stifled. The man's demeanor changed immediately. He stiffened, his eyes darting towards the interior of the house. "That's just the TV," he said hastily, handing me a 20. "Keep the change." I nodded and turned to leave, but the whimpering grew louder, turning into a muffled cry for help. It was unmistakably a human voice, and it was coming from the house. As I paused, contemplating my next move, a white van with tinted windows pulled into the cul-de-sac. It parked behind my car, blocking my exit. 2 men stepped out, both considerably larger than me, talking in hushed tones. They began to approach me. Panic surged. The dots connected in my head all too clearly. An isolated location, a shady customer, and now 2 intimidating men. This wasn't just about a pizza delivery. "Hey!" one of the men called out. "You got another order in there? We're hungry." Thinking on my feet, I pulled out my phone, raised it as if taking a photo, and shouted, "Just got your plates. The police will be here any minute." The 2 men exchanged glances, clearly not expecting this reaction. Seizing the moment, I dashed back to my car, locked the doors, and started the engine. The man from the house charged out, yelling at the others, but I didn't stick around to hear the conversation. I sped past the van, tires screeching, not stopping until I reached the bright lights of the city. I immediately reported everything to the police. They raided the house, but it was empty, save for some evidence suggesting someone had been held there against their will. My statement and the little evidence they found indicated this was likely an attempted kidnapping. In the subsequent weeks, there was a citywide alert for the white van, and residents were warned about suspicious delivery requests. But as far as I know, those men were never caught. To this day, I can't shake the feeling that those men are still out there, waiting for their next unsuspecting victim. And every time I order a delivery, I can't help but worry for the driver, hoping they don't find themselves at the dead end of a sinister plot. Every delivery driver has a story or 2 about strange encounters on the job. Late nights, unfamiliar neighborhoods, and odd requests are all part of the gig. But one night changed everything for me, and even now I can't shake the feeling that I'm still being watched. I'd been delivering for about 3 years when I picked up an order from a popular steakhouse in town. A sizable order, several meals, appetizers, drinks, the works. The address was in an upscale neighborhood I rarely ventured to, a good 30 minutes from the restaurant. The GPS led me through winding roads lined with massive trees, their branches reaching out like twisted arms in the dim light of dusk. Soon, the opulence of suburban houses gave way to sprawling mansions with long driveways. When I reached the given address, I found myself in front of an imposing iron gate. A faded gold emblem reading Harrington Estates adorned its center. I rang the buzzer and waited. Moments later, a deep voice crackled through the intercom. "Who is it?" "Delivery from the steakhouse," I replied. The gate creaked and began its slow journey open. I drove up the long cobblestone driveway, marveling at the sheer size of the mansion in front of me, but something felt off. The place, though undeniably grand, appeared neglected. Vines crawled up its walls, windows were dark, and the once vibrant garden was now overgrown. Shaking off my unease, I grabbed the food and headed to the front door. Before I could knock, it swung open, revealing a man in his 50s. He was impeccably dressed, but had a tired look in his eyes, a weariness that seemed to go deeper than just a long day. "Place it on the table there," he said, pointing to an ornate table in the foyer. As I laid out the food, I couldn't help but notice the house's interior. It was beautiful, sure, but there was an air of melancholy, as if the house held on to memories it wished to forget. Suddenly, a chilling scream echoed from upstairs. I nearly dropped the last box, my heart pounding in my chest. The man sighed deeply. "My apologies. My wife, she's unwell." "Is she okay? Do you need help?" I asked, both out of genuine concern and a growing desire to leave this unsettling place. "She's taken care of. It's been a difficult few months." His voice was low and trembled slightly. I nodded, not knowing how to respond. "Your total is $78. He handed me a crisp 100 bill, telling me to keep the change. I thanked him and hurried back to my car, eager to be done with this delivery. But as I was about to pull away, I noticed movement from an upstairs window. A woman, presumably his wife, was staring down at me. Her face was pale and her eyes seemed desperate, filled with terror. She pressed a handwritten note against the glass. It read, "Help me." I felt a cold dread wash over me. The screams, the man's behavior, and now this? Panic surged as I grappled with what to do. I decided to call the police from a safer distance. A few blocks away, I pulled over, called the police, recounting everything I'd witnessed. They assured me they would send a unit to check on the woman. Hours later, after my shift ended, curiosity got the best of me, and I called the local precinct for an update. The officer on duty informed me they did a wellness check at the Harrington Estates but found no evidence of any wrongdoing. The man, Lord Harrington apparently, had explained that his wife had been undergoing psychiatric treatment and sometimes had episodes. The note, a result of her delusions, he claimed. They had found no reason to hold him. I wanted to believe that was the end of it, but things got stranger. For weeks after the incident, I felt like I was being followed. Cars that lingered too long behind me, unknown numbers calling and hanging up, and once a note on my windshield that read, "Some things are better left alone." I stopped delivering after that. I moved to a different city, changed jobs, and tried to put everything behind me. But I still wonder about that night, about the woman in the window, and about the length some might go to in order to protect their secrets. Now, whenever I order something for delivery, I can't help but wonder if the driver will have a story of their own to tell, a secret glimpse into a world they were never meant to see. I've been a delivery driver for about 5 years now, hopping between different apps to make ends meet. Most days were a monotonous blur of addresses, pizzas, and packages. But there's one delivery I'll never forget. It wasn't because of a generous tip or a barking dog. It was something much darker. It was an unremarkably cold evening, and the sun had just sunk beneath the horizon, shrouding the world in shades of purple and gray. I got a ping on my app, signaling a new delivery. The address was at the edge of town, a place I'd never delivered to before. The order was a bit odd, just a single pizza, no toppings, not even cheese, just a base with tomato sauce. I shrugged, thinking maybe it was for someone with allergies or maybe a prank. Either way, my job was to deliver it. As I drove further from the city center, the houses grew more sparse, the streetlights dimmer, and the feeling of isolation more profound. I turned onto a gravel road that led me into a dense, imposing forest. The trees seemed to lean inwards as if whispering sinister secrets to one another. I kept driving, reassured by the glow of my headlights and the GPS which confidently told me I was only a few minutes away. Eventually, I arrived at a clearing where an old, dilapidated house stood. Its windows were boarded up, and the once white paint was now a grimy shade of gray. My gut churned with unease, but I reminded myself it was just a delivery. I took the pizza box, leaving my car running, a habit I had when expecting a quick drop-off. There was no clear path to the front door, so I carefully made my way through the overgrown grass and weeds. As I approached the porch, I noticed an old broken swing that creaked ominously in the gentle wind. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if I should just leave the pizza and go. But professionalism, or maybe just sheer stupidity, compelled me to knock. There was silence at first, Then faintly I heard what sounded like shuffling from within. The door slowly opened, revealing an elderly woman. Her skin was as pale as moonlight, and her eyes, though clouded with age, were sharp and attentive. She didn't say a word. She just stared at me, making me increasingly uncomfortable. "I have your pizza," I managed to stammer out, trying to sound cheerful. She simply nodded and handed me an old crumpled $10 bill. I gave her the pizza and she slowly began to close the door. But just as it was about to shut, she whispered, "Thank you, but I didn't order a pizza." Confused and anxious, I hurried back to my car. As I reversed out of the clearing, my headlights illuminated the forest and my heart nearly stopped. There were people, at least a dozen, standing among the trees, silently watching. They were of various ages, from young children to elderly folk. They stood motionless, just staring at me with blank expressions. I slammed the gas and sped away, not daring to look back. When I was safely back on main roads, I pulled over, trying to calm my racing heart. I called the delivery hotline, explaining what had happened. After checking their records, they confirmed what I dreaded. They had no order for that address. Someone else had used the app, maybe as a sick joke, or I didn't even want to think about the other possibilities. The company advised me to report the incident to the police. After an investigation, they found the old house abandoned. No signs of the elderly woman, the people in the woods, or any recent inhabitation. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. I quit my delivery job after that night. I still don't know who those people were or what they wanted. Maybe they were just residents of a forgotten part of town, or perhaps there was something more sinister at play. All I know is that every time I see a delivery driver, I wonder if they've ever been sent to a place where they weren't meant to go. And I hope, for their sake, that they never do.